oil mix ratios, oil brands, base materials, detergent levels, additive levels. When you think about purchasing oil, like which oil is the best for your saw, you may think, well, Stihl made my saw, I should buy Stihl oil. Husqvarna made my saw, I should buy what Husqvarna recommends, so I'm going to buy Husqvarna oil. Well, think about the oil industry. What does it take? What does it take to search for oil, find the oil, remove the oil from the ground, process the oil, and put it in a container, mix it with the right chemistry and additives, and put it on the shelf to sell? That takes billions of dollars of effort. Stihl, Husqvarna, Echo, Shindaiwa, whoever makes saws, they don't make oil. They have oil made for them. They don't have oil made by them. There's a big difference. And when you think about how much it takes to find the oil, produce the oil, manufacture the oil, distribute the oil, how many companies are there doing that? Not very many. Not very many. So, your bottle of oil that you see at the Tractor Supply, or a bottle of oil that you see at Walmart, they may be from the same manufacturer, from the same big tub of oil, poured into different buckets. I'm no expert on all of that stuff, but I know there aren't thousands of oil companies and manufacturers. There are only a few who make the raw materials that go into the oil. So, don't worry about it. Just don't worry about it. It's the least of your concerns. If you have some oil mixed in there and some oil that's of reasonable quality, you're going to be fine. It's not worth it. I've got a little show and tell today. Food for thought today about saws and oil. My granddad's saw. This saw was made in the early 80s, 1980s. It's got the old plastic cover. Oh yeah. This is when saws had metal. Ooh. Look at that chain catch, solid metal. They were heavy, lots of metal. Oh yeah, made in Japan. CS 351 VL. Oh. Boy, that's premier safety right there. No chain brake, just a small wrist protector. As I said before, this was my papa's saw. This saw was made in 1980, and I can remember a lot of trees that he cut with this little saw. Firewood and some pretty good sized trees. I can't believe he did it with this. It's only 32 cc's, but man, it stood the test of time. But you know, Papa was a homeowner. He wasn't a logger, pro logger. So the number of hours that are on this thing are not severe, probably. I wouldn't know how to guess, but and it's had a little bit of carb work over the years. I did some carb work to it maybe a few months ago, and I keep the saw just for posterity's sake, just for sentimental value, just to remember my granddad and remember the good days cutting wood with my uncle and my dad when they were younger than I am now. Even though this saw is old, this thing will fire up, and I'll show you. Look, here's the muffler. It's obviously cold, hasn't been running. I did check to see if it has fuel and oil in the reservoirs. Give it a little choke, turn it on. That saw is old. The manual, I've got some information from the manual that I looked up just for fun, just for giggles. And they specified 20-to-1 for the oil mix back in 1980. They did specify in the manual to use a 2-stroke oil. But I'm pretty sure I remember my granddad mixing regular gas from the pump. Of course, back then there was no ethanol. Gas from the pump and motor oil. Just regular 10W40 or 10W30 or something like that. He may have had 2-stroke oil, but knowing Papaw, he didn't buy anything special like that. He just put it in. Also, I remember he had this little wooden box that he built, and he would stand up a little plastic container of gear oil, and I think it was actually gear oil. I don't think it was bar oil, and I think he put that in and used that as bar oil. And that stuff was thick and slimy. In the wintertime, it was like thicker than corn syrup. So, in the manual, believe it or not, it actually says to use motor oil for the bar oil. Some people tell me I'm crazy. That was actually recommended back then. All right, I've got here's how I strap in stuff in my truck. I'm sure you think that's pretty clever. Anyway, what about oil? What about oil for your chainsaw? You know, hey there, you know, with respect to oil, I don't claim to be any kind of expert. I just use my saws to do the work I need around the place. And I'm probably considered a typical user. I use a saw maybe a little bit more than the average person, but maybe every week or two I'll fire up a saw, cut a little bit. Sometimes a couple hours at a time. Sometimes less, sometimes more. I have a few chainsaws in a couple different sizes. I've got a 42cc, 48, 66, and 88 cc's. Those 4 saws cover a pretty wide range of what I need to do. So I'm not the kind of person that has a whole rack full of saws. So mine get used a little bit, and I've had them for years, and they're old, and I haven't upgraded to the latest and greatest. And I do a bit of maintenance on my saws, but I don't worry so much about oil. And I've always enjoyed posting and reading posts on forums. I've enjoyed the arborist site especially, and the outdoor equipment for them, the OPE, outdoor power equipment for them. And I think it's funny that sometimes people say, you know, people joke, oh, another oil thread. There's so many posts out there and so many long threads about which oil's best, what type of oil's best, which spec of oil's best. For bar oil, should you use this, should you use that? For two-stroke oil, should you use this, should you use that? Should you even use two-stroke oil? You know, what base oil is best for the oil? What additives are best for the oil? It goes on, and golly, I don't know why it's so interesting to so many people. But I guess within me, I kind of think, well, I want to do the best for my equipment that I can. And, you know, if I can choose something that's a little bit better than something else, if it doesn't cost too much more, I'll do it. But as far as oil goes, I think if you put oil in the saw and it's some kind of a reasonable mix between 20-to-1 from the old saw recommendation to 40 and 50-to-1 with some of the more modern saws, almost any oil, I think you're going to be fine. Personally, that's my opinion. One thing I think more important than what type of oil you have and how much oil you have is that you have some oil. No lubrication is going to kill your saw. Some lubrication will probably make it last 35, 40, 50 years. So we, at our place, have instituted a procedure for how we do our oil. We use small 1-gallon containers for our mix that we use in chainsaws and weed eaters. We never use any other size but 1 gallon. And these are the only 1 gallons we have around the farm. So if we pick up a 1-gallon container, we know that somebody was supposed to have mixed oil in that gas. Another thing we do to make sure we don't straight gas our chainsaws and weed eaters is that when we put the oil in, we always put the oil in first. Because my thought is, a person could put gas in there, it would feel full, but if you come upon a full gas can, how do you know full was put in? If you always put the oil in first to the empty container, then you put your gas in, you know it's right. Of course, you can check it by the color, but people don't always do that. Another thing we did was we made our own little container, and we fill our oil into this little container, and it's predetermined how much we need to put in there and how much we fill it to. This one, I don't even have a fill level on it. I've got it designed to just fill up with oil and pour in to a 1-gallon container. So my kids, they don't have to worry about measuring or mixing, or they don't worry about if this container will mix 2 gallons or 2.5 gallons. They fill this up, put it in the empty container, fill it with gas. I like these little containers. They're handy. This little thing works pretty well. Doesn't spill too badly. You know, you can slop it around in your truck. Doesn't spill. Has a pretty good little thing on it. I think there's probably some safety spill or slow pour features we've probably defeated on this thing. But we've had that a long time. That's my favorite one. So, in a pinch, we've even used this stuff. It's made for boats. People, of course, debate all the time Of course, people debate, you know, they say that the two-stroke oil for a boat is designed for a water-cooled engine, and it is. And they're different than an air-cooled two-stroke engine in a chainsaw or weed eater. Of course, there are differences. But in a pinch, I've used it. Don't tell anybody, but I've used it. Back to this old saw. You know, I looked it up on Wikipedia. You know, that may not be the ultimate source, but it's one source. It was something like in the 1880s, a two-stroke engine was first designed and patented. And then something like 1908 or 1904 or something, someone made the first practical two-stroke engine, and they began using them. I didn't realize for the longest time why a two-stroke even needs oil in the gas. And I'm embarrassed to admit that I was an adult before I understood. You know, it was probably 10 years ago or so when I started getting a little bit more into saws that I even understood why you mix oil in the gas. Well, the reason is that two-strokes are different than cars, which have four strokes. So a car is kind of like this. You know, I've got a picture here of a car engine. A car is kind of like this. All of the combustion takes place at the top end, and the valves allow the air and fuel to come into the top of the piston, burn it, and send it out through the exhaust. Well, two-stroke doesn't work that way. A two-stroke works differently. The oil and fuel that's mixed in there goes into the bottom end first, below the piston, lubricates the bearings with that little bit of oil, and then that oil and fuel mixture, which is at that point in a vapor, not a liquid, it's a vapor, it's then passed up on top of the piston where it can be compressed, the spark can be ignited, and it burns. So it's a different system. The advantage is you don't have to carry around that big sump of oil, so it makes the saw lighter. It makes a two-stroke engine lighter. And also, the two-stroke and four-stroke moniker, you know, tells you that this thing fires every time the piston goes up. So you have more chances to make power. So they're generally more powerful for their size than a four-stroke. So what does oil do in an engine? In a two-stroke engine and a four-stroke engine? What does the oil actually do? Well, again, I'm no expert, but some experts say, of course, oil lubricates. Everybody knows that. That's the main reason. But it also cools the parts that it comes in contact with. It cleans the parts that it comes in contact with. That's the reason different oils have different additives in them for different cleaning aspects. Oil helps provide a seal. In four strokes and two strokes, there are seals on the engine. This has a crankcase seal on both sides. Since there's that mist of oil and fuel on the inside, that oil helps to seal around the lip of those seals. So without it, it wouldn't seal as well. So oil also serves to help with the sealing aspect of the engine. So what's best oil? Well, something you might want to think about too is what's the best fuel. Well, think about what's the best oil? What's the best gas? What's the best fuel? Even at 20-to-1 mix, you're mostly putting fuel through here, not oil. Some say that the fuel is even more important than the oil. I would agree. Some say not to use ethanol. It sounds like a good idea. I don't even follow that. It's just too much trouble. It's too easy to go to the regular gas station, use the same gas that we use for everything else. I can get ethanol-free gas if I go to the extra expense and trouble, but it hasn't been a problem. Think about how does the fuel burn in here too. If you take a cup of fuel, and just poured it in here, tried to light it, it wouldn't burn as fast as if you had a cup of fuel that had evaporated into the air, into a mist or vapor. Then you ignited it, it would practically explode. That's what happens in here. An engine doesn't burn fuel in liquid form. It burns it in a mist, in an atomized vapor. Very small particles. If certain oil mix, certain styles of oil, certain additives, certain base materials are the absolute best for your saw, why are they not specified? I'll argue they're not necessarily specified because designers, engineers, manufacturers, business people who run businesses, who make saws, have conflicting requirements for things that they make. They can make saws to last better. They can specify the best oil, the best gas. They also have to make stuff that will sell, that has a reasonable cost, and that meets requirements that they're forced to meet. So over time, they may say 50-to-1 is what you need to run. That may be enough to make your saw last more than your lifetime for the average user. Maybe the saw would last a little bit longer with more oil, but if they say 50-to-1, that satisfies their requirements, satisfies yours too. There's more going on than meets the eye at times. Once again, I'm not the world's foremost expert, but let me just mention a few things as food for thought. Here's food for thought. Think about this. This is a 2013 Ram pickup. Its engine calls for 5W20 motor oil. This saw is from 1980. It calls for a 20-to-1 mix ratio, gas to oil. Over the years, that mix ratio has gone down and down and down. 30-to-1, 40-to-1, 50-to-1. The cars, the oil that's specified for the cars has also changed a lot. When I was a kid, I can remember my dad pouring 10W40 into a vehicle. And then over time, the oil has changed. Viscosities have gone down and down and down. 10W30, 10W20. This thing calls for 5W20. There are even thinner oils than that now in the store, like 0W20. And think about that. Has manufacturing gotten that much better since the 1980s that we can use thinner oil and still protect the engine? Is oil technology that much better that we can protect our car engines with thinner and thinner oil? Could there be anything else going on that's not mentioned? Well, I'll mention it. EPA, Environmental Protection Regulations. What are car manufacturers doing all the time? They're forced to make better and better fuel economy. Is that 0W20 oil designed to protect the engine or to produce fuel economy? Is 50-to-1 mix in a saw designed to protect the saw or to protect your nose from breathing fumes and smoke? My opinion is there's a little of both going on. Maybe the technology is a little bit better. I don't think it's that much better. I mix 40-to-1 in my weed eaters and my chainsaws. I like to have a little bit more oil. I like it to smoke just a little bit. It makes me feel better. It makes me feel better knowing that there's oil on those bearings, those piston rod, connecting rod bearings, cylinder walls. I just feel better knowing there's a little bit more oil in there. Hug your parents, hug your friends. Do something else more enjoyable. Don't sit around and worry about your oil. This is testament that you don't have to be all that particular about what oil you burn in your equipment, because most people will never wear out a saw anyway. They'll never use it enough hours to wear out a saw, even with improper maintenance.